Hey everyone, and welcome to the Hair Healer Podcast. I'm the host, Colleen Dixon, aka the Hair Healer. On my show, I interview clients, hairstylists, healers, friends, family, people in the beauty industry, and sometimes just a person with a story. We discuss their lives, healing journeys, astrology, inner child healing, spirituality, trauma, hopes, dreams, and everything in between. All questions are channeled to me in the moment while doing the interview. My hopes is to give a raw and uncensored view into someone's world and soul in hopes to raise the consciousness of the planet and bring connection back into the world. Now join me and let's go exchange some energies. Hey everyone, happy new week. It's the Hair Healer. This was going to be my last episode, which you guys know, but you know how I like to switch things up and turn it around and make it different. Next week, we'll have my last episode. I decided to do so much of my life has changed and the podcast has changed from the beginning to the end of the season. And I figured I would do a kind of close out the Hair Healer podcast. Catch everyone up on my life, on the podcast, and what to expect for season 2. So look out for the real last episode next week. If you've been paying attention to my Instagram or on Facebook at the Hair Healer 1111 or Colleen Dixon, you know that I finally released the rules and the prize of the contest. So for those of you who are listening, the rules, it's really that simple. Go on to somewhere that you're listening to this on, whether it be Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, I'm on them all, and leave a review, screenshot it, and send it to me. That's it. And in 2 weeks, I have to look at the date. I don't have it written down yet. I'm going to pull them. It's a Friday night. I'm going to pull them live, and whoever gets the top 2, the first prize is $200 Visa gift card, a free natal chart reading done by me, yours truly, and a bunch of stuff I have to look from Allison Unplugged, all of her tea blends she sent in. Leslie from one of the episodes, she sent in all of her amazing witchy stuff, like retrograde spray, all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot in there. I also had to throw in a leopard print bag, if you know me, some sage. We got a lot in there. And then the second prize winner is just a free natal chart done by me, which is a birth chart. So I'm really excited. Get on there, get onto my Instagram, get on there, write, rate, review, do all those things and win some of these amazing prizes. More details. I think I did it the 24th, Friday the 24th. I wrote it down, but I'm sorry, I need to look. Yeah, it's been I hope everyone had a good week. It's been crazy. I don't know about you, but I can really feel this Mars moving into Aries. I posted a funny meme on social media about like someone running from fire because their toilet paper was off. And it really can feel like that. So Mars is a harder planet. It's a malefic planet. It doesn't necessarily bring good fortune to you. We will say that. And in life, it can't all be good. There has to be the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so it can be good, but at times it can be bad. So imagine it when it's in fire. So sort of like your aggression, a short temper, right? Something just so little is setting me off. And then I come back down. I feel like normal. It's almost like the Hulk. You kind of rage and then you're back down. But it's also, what else is good? It's a good time to get things done. You can just work and grind, and Mars and Aries in its home sign, that is on your side. So put in the work the next 6 months to whatever your dreams are and get that done and go with the fire. But again, the next 6 months in general are going to be shifting and changing. And I know pretty soon it's going to be in a square with Saturn and Mars. And I think that's the end of August, the beginning of September. So there's still going to be some changes in the world. We can say that, as we know, because we're in the middle of the destruction. But we are coming out of Mercury retrograde that went direct yesterday. And I was just down the shore with my family, and it's so funny going down there because the start of the trip, I think I forgot 5 things. One of the keys wasn't working. I lost this. One of the kids that, you know what I mean? Just all that stuff, and leaving just a tiny, tiny bit smoother. But it was cool to be down there. And as you guys know, usually every year I vacation with my ex, the father of my kids, and his family. And the last couple years, my soon-to-be ex-husband, and we'll talk about that on next week's episode, had also come. And I have not been with my kid's father since I was pregnant with Remington, 3 months pregnant with him, 4 months pregnant. So we haven't been together in, 5 years almost. So, because Remy's over 4. But because of that, people always think it's throughout my life, how do you guys get along? How do you guys do this? How do you family together? How do you vacation together? He's like a sibling. I can't explain it. I think sometimes we sharing a child is such a karmic bond. Sharing a child with someone is such a beautiful thing. And I look especially at Abram and I just see his dad. And I think that the world is so skewed and thinks that, that once you end a relationship, particularly one with kids, you have to hate each other, you have to fight, you can't get along, you can't do family things together. And I'm here to tell you that's totally wrong. We go on vacation every year together. We go camping together. We do holidays together. We've been in each other's relationships after the fact, meaning like just involved with women he had dated and not involved that way. People, get your mind out of the gutter. Just kidding. But yes, no, I'm kidding. But just as friends. So I think that that is a beautiful thing and that you can do that. And we will eventually do a co-parenting episode, but I will say that is how I grew up. My parents lived across the street from each other, divorced, had the business, were teachers, did everything together. So I guess I get a leg up. It's normal, but for me, but it's really beautiful to see my kids just be happy and to not have to fight and grind. And when we first split up, it was not good. And he had been using drugs at the time and had a relapse. And we kind of hate each other, but I would never take him to court because I was so close with his parents. They're like my second parent. They were my second parents. And everyone would say, Colleen, you need to take him to court. I'm like, I'm not doing that. It's bullshit. Why do I want to go through and get the law involved with all this stuff? And thank God I didn't, A, because our relationship only tightened and we learned how to work with each other. But B, I am so busy right now that he has taken up the load. I mean, since quarantine, him and I have tag teamed the children together. Normally my mom or his parents are super involved and they didn't because of the quarantine and everything, the coronavirus. So he's really stepped up. And now all of a sudden I'm thinking like, I should be paying him child support, honestly. And thankfully that we don't ever have to battle. We can go through these balances of lives and ebbs and flows together as a family without actually being together. And it's so easy to vacation because we know each other's habits and the way we go around, but yet we can have our family time. The kids are happy and we're like brother and sister, but we don't need to nourish the relationship. So we get our own time. So again, I feel like that's what I needed as transitioning into like my older life into this new life, entrepreneurship. I needed a few days just to relax. And again, a lot is going right now in the sun. Mercury is retrograding in Cancer. The sun is in Cancer. We got a lot going on. The moon was in Pisces. So get near some water. This is a good time. When we think of water, we think of it's a national symbol for rebirth, at least in the hair healer's head. And we need to get there. Sometimes we have all this old energy from the last 6 months. Get near a body of water, get near a lake, get near something and get in there, get your feet in there, get your body in there. I did a small little thing on my Instagram, a little let go technique to let go of trauma, pain, hurt. Take some rocks and take them from the water so they're already immersed in that and place each one of those worry, doubt, fear, trauma on those rocks and throw them in there, okay? It's time to rebirth, people. Rebirth and feel this Mars energy and just rebuild the phoenix, all right? We're all phoenixes and we're trying to rise and shine. Talking about being rebirthed and reborn in life, I'm excited about today's episode. Again, it's a pretty big episode because it was going to be the last one, but good old, I needed to have the last word. I'm super excited. I met Ezekiel, also known as Zeke, which I'll probably say Zeke because I have an easier time saying that. Many years ago in the rooms of NA, we actually talk on this episode about how we kind of met, like I just knew of him before I knew anything. And he is a very cool person. But this episode, yes, we get into a little bit of the history of his drug abuse and why he got into drugs. But this episode's about his transition. He was actually born a female, and this whole episode is about him finding himself, finding his true self, what that path started to look like for him. When did it become, at what age, and how every question you could ever want to know about transitioning. He has come on and he has shared so openly about his story. He's a beautiful person, a beautiful soul, a beautiful everything. This is, again, a very educational episode. One of the things I like to do on the podcast is to bring so many different lifestyles and people and things to open our minds, open our bodies, open our hearts, open up everything to understand that we are all people, souls. We're souls having this human experience in this kind of flesh shell, we will say. So I'm super excited about this episode. Thank you, Zeke, for coming on, being honest, being loving, being true to yourself and telling us your story. I'm really excited. Let me stop doing the Gemini ramble. Again, please go on, please rate, review, whatever you listen to this on, send this to someone. Follow me on Instagram at the Hair Healer 1111, Facebook Colleen Dixon. Again, I'm working on my Facebook page too, so that's coming. I love you guys. Let me jump into this episode. Here we go. Hey guys, welcome back to the Hair Healer podcast. I hope everyone is doing well. I'm super excited about this episode. Because he feels like since I met him in the rooms in a 12-step fellowship, and we never really like fully connected, but we had lots of mutual friends, good mutual friends. And I just sort of watched his progression, his journey. So it feels like I know you on like a soul deep level. Like we have that when you meet someone in the rooms, you have that instant kind of understanding and everything. But I just always loved your energy and your passion, and you have quite a story, which I was excited to bring to the Hair Healer podcast, a Hair Healer podcast exclusive. Let me introduce you to my friend Zeke. Say hello, Zeke.
Hey, guys.
Now, where are you living? You were just starting to talk. Where are you?
So it's like Sellersville, Percy, PA. So I'm like out in the country.
Country? Is that near Pottstown?
It's about 35, 40 minutes from Pottstown. I'm like right below Quakertown.
Okay. How is the quarantine out there? Do they take it serious or no?
Not at all.
No, right?
Or still out at the park and the shopping center, walking
around. And just living life.
Yeah, just living their best life out here.
How do you feel about it?
I mean, I will be honest, I did not take it as serious in the beginning. Obviously, I couldn't go anywhere, but my job's considered essential, so I was still going out to work. And then my dad got sick and ended up getting COVID, and he was in the hospital, and was in ICU. They really thought he was going to die, and he had to get plasma infusion, and all this stuff. And then everybody in the house tested positive except for me.
Everyone tested positive with you?
Yeah, except for me.
I know. You're lucky.
I really have no idea. I don't know if I'm immune or what, but I mean, my job paid me to not go to work for 3 weeks of quarantine because it was like a risk. And I've been back to work for 2 weeks now. And I mean, I've still like seen some friends since we went yellow. But I really am just like going to work and going home for the time being, just to be safe. Well,
you've had that kind of contact. How was it? Did everyone else get as sick or no? They got it.
Yeah. So my mom had similar symptoms to my dad, but not severe, where she needed to go to the hospital. And then after a couple of days, it kind of drifted away. And then everybody else just kind of my one sister lost her smell and her taste for a month. But never had any other symptoms. The rest of them were all asymptomatic but tested positive.
Wow. Yeah. I feel kind of like that's what we're all going to find out, that we all had it at some point. Half of us didn't even show signs.
That's what I think of too, is I think, that I probably did at some point and never showed symptoms. And then it got past the point of being able to test positive. And then when I had to get tested, it was just I came up negative. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, that's a relief, right? That's a relief. Well, I'm happy your dad and everyone is okay. What a journey. Now, when did you get clean? When did you come into the rooms? Before or after me? I came in 2012.
So I originally got clean in 2011 and stayed clean for almost 6 years and then relapsed. And then I got clean again in 2017.
Okay, cool. All right, good. So how was that? What was the relapse? What was the journey with the relapse?
So it was pretty much really it's no different than what other people talk about. I, built this life, through the program and just, doing things outside of the program and taking care of myself. And I had everything that I thought that I wanted. I had the girl, I had the house, I had the job, all these outside things. And I started to forget about taking care of the inside. And, it was this really toxic relationship that I really had no business being in, that everybody was this is probably a bad idea. And I was like, it's fine.
Let's do it. Let's jump right in.
Exactly. And, and it was good for the first year and a half, 2 years of it was good. There wasn't a lot of issues. And then it once it got bad quick. And, at this point I had took myself away from meetings. I started lying about things, even simple things oh, I'm here, but I'm actually here. Yeah, like I would like withhold information because I didn't want to hear what people were going to say because I knew what the response was going to be. And, eventually it got me to this place where I was in a really dark place. I knew that I couldn't be in this relationship anymore. I started getting really suicidal and wanted to use, and I couldn't walk away, and neither could she. Like we would have conversations about it and knew that like it wasn't going to end well for either of us. And, I called my sponsor at the time that I was like barely talking to, and I was like, look, I'm going to get high or I'm going to kill myself. And she was like, you know what you need to do. And I got high. The opportunity presented itself and I used, and it was just, within weeks, things kind of just took off and life was a shit show for a while. And I struggled to stay clean. Like part of me wanted to stay clean, but I couldn't. And then when I finally wanted to, I literally couldn't stay clean for more than like 11 days. And, people just told me to keep coming to meetings. I would go to meetings high. I was still at that job. And, finally I got like a little bit of fire, and my sponsor was like, look, you're going to have to do the same things that you did in 2011 when you got clean and like change everything. So like I left that job. Luckily my boss like fired me, so I was able to get unemployment. I went to meetings two times a day for 6 months. I left that apartment that had all those negative memories for me, and like I like started to meet new people instead of like going back to like the same people that I was always hanging out with before. And not that anything was wrong with them, but like I needed to step outside of my comfort zone because for so many years I was used to the same people and not really changing things up. And it made me stay clean until I wanted to stay clean fully, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that was 2017?
Yeah. So October 19th is when I'll have 3 years.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge. Wow. Now, one of the reasons why for everyone listening, I want to bring Zeke on is this is the first time he's ever told his story, correct? And we're not talking the drug story. That was just because I knew that I'll have to have you on for a whole nother thing. And I'm sure that's going to tie into your story. But Zeke, and I want to use, and he and I had a long discussion before here, so I can always make sure I use the right terminology. I'm learning it amongst everyone else, everyone listening into the show. So, and I have ADHD, so sometimes I'm like, and I just want to always make sure I'm saying the right thing, saying the right terminology. So as we have this interview and we discuss, and for some reason I accidentally say something, it would never be offensive, but maybe use the wrong term or something, just please forgive me. We're all learning here. Okay. So Zeke was formerly known as Morgan and born a woman. I was going to say a little girl, but now you're a grown man. So, but we all know that babies are born. And so where do I even start? There's so many questions, when was the first time that you realized like, wait, I don't feel like I'm in the right body?
So, I could probably think as early as like 6 or 7 years old. I'm the youngest of 5 girls. And,
all girls?
Yeah. And so it was the same thing for all of us. My dad dressed us all, like got all our clothes, did our hair, stuff like that. And I always just felt uncomfortable wearing girl clothes or, having to do like quote unquote what is supposed to be what girls play with and what boys play with as kids. And I was never interested in it. And once I started to, once I was like 6 or 7, like besides going out to like events and stuff like that, like I was allowed to wear, shorts and t-shirts and stuff like that. And a lot of times, like I would want to run around without my shirt on. I did puberty. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah. And, my parents, like my hair was cut shorter and I liked it that way because I would remember even at like 8 or 9 years old being in public with my dad and somebody referring to me as he, or like your son. And my dad, like he wouldn't get upset, but he would just like correct them.
Yeah.
But I would feel some type of way on the inside and I never knew what it was, why I would get so upset about it. And
then you get upset. I wasn't sure if you actually had a good feeling or a bad feeling.
Yeah, no, I had a negative feeling about it, but I never understood why because, I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that that didn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
It wasn't until, closer towards teenage years. And at this point I had already started using.
At what age did you start using? Like probably 14?
12, 13 is when I started.
Was it to kind of escape the confusion you were feeling inside?
So part of it was, so I have two older sisters that are addicts.
Okay.
And they're older than me. So like they, at that point, they were already, drinking and smoking weed, and their friends would come over and stuff like that. And I think part of it was just like the curiosity of like watching them sneak around behind my parents' back and like do
Yeah.
things. And like
Yeah.
the thrill of it was like exciting to me. And that's kind of where it started. But then I started to realize like I liked the way that this felt. Like it made me feel good, and it made me feel like invincible, and like I could do whatever I wanted to and I wouldn't get caught. And then as I started to progress into teenage years, where like my emotions started to like actually show, where I had to like feel things and think about like real life things, is when I started to realize that I was like struggling internally with like who
Wow.
I was, and not being able to express how I was. And, around that time, 13, 14 is when I, came out as gay, and,
Okay.
told my parents that I, was attracted to women, and that's what I wanted, wanted to do. And, for a really long time, for years, my dad was like, it's just a phase. It's just a
Oh,
phase.
your dad would say, like, I was gonna say, how were they? Were they supportive? Or were they just like, oh, you're young, you don't know what you want?
Yeah, that's pretty much like my mom was always like, my mom's always been like the peacekeeper. Like she never like really has anything negative to say, which I don't know
Yeah.
if that's a good or bad thing sometimes in cases like this. But like she was supportive of it. Like she never really made judgment or anything. And she would like try to have conversations.
You're just like,
And
okay, honey.
yeah, it was never like anything in depth. And I think that it was like, I know that it was a struggle. And I couldn't see that then. But like, at least she tried to make an effort. Like my dad was more so just like, he's like really old school and from the South.
Yeah.
So
You're
he's
from the
like,
South?
yeah. So he's like, yeah, it's just a phase. Like you'll grow out of it. And he did that for years. And, eventually I'm like, okay, well, it's been, a decade now.
But
So
I was
like,
gonna say, like, were you bringing home like girlfriends and he was
yeah.
still like, it's just a phase?
Yeah, I did. When I mean, even through my years of using, like I, had dated one of my sister's friends that was older than me. Like, there
How'd
was
that
always
go? How was
it,
that?
it wasn't that bad actually. Like they were friends, and I had like met her through my sister, and it was kind of like a low key thing. Because I mean, where I grew up, and like really even still now, like when I came out then, I mean, nobody was openly gay, and people that were
Wow.
like, I was bullied through school, and
Really?
yeah, it's like a very like it's a very conservative area. Like there's not like everything, like there's no gray area. Like everything is
Okay.
just like dry. This is what it is. It's really old school, like a lot of older people. And like that's how their kids are raised. So that's what they just think
That's
is
what
like
they,
normal.
oh
Yeah.
my
And I
God.
think as a teenager, you think that, like you want to be popular, you want to be cool, you don't want to be made fun of. So like I feel like it takes a lot as a teenager for the ones that choose to like not follow other people and be like, you know what, I'm going to be friends with this person because maybe I can identify,
Yeah.
or whatever, as opposed to just being like, all right, well, I'm just going to make fun of this kid with everybody else because that's what we're doing, and they won't focus on me. And I think that's what a lot of it was.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing about it is a lot of those people that bullied me are like now openly gay or like
That's
trans.
funny. Wow.
Yeah.
I
it's
mean, I
it's
think there's so much truth to that. You're hiding your pain, or you don't want to reflect on the inside, so you're judging the that. So, are you friends with them now? Like, have you guys made up any of that?
So I've ran into some of them over, I mean, up until this past year, like I moved from Percy in 2013,
Okay,
which is like the year that I started, like really transitioning. And
okay,
I come back to visit my parents, but I never would like go out to eat around here. I never stayed here long enough to be able to run into somebody, even at the gas station.
that
Um, so like I would run into people here and there, but like people in the beginning would give looks like they knew my face, but they
yeah,
couldn't figure out who I was.
yeah,
Like a lot of them are like, I just like can't, it's hard. There's like no conversation of substance. And it's
interesting.
like, it's hard for me to just like have a conversation with somebody just to be like, oh, well, we can relate because we're trans, or
Yeah,
you're gay. Like
absolutely.
that's not enough for me to
Yeah,
like have a conversation.
I didn't know if they like reached out and apologized, if
No,
they
I've never
no
got.
really like, hey, like I'm so sorry,
No,
nothing.
I've never gotten an apology.
Never? Wow. Yeah, maybe, I guess, maybe if they were in the 12-step fellowship or something.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If that was the case, I'm sure I would. But yeah, nobody I've ever gotten an apology from. I mean, they're nice to me when I see them.
Yeah.
But
Now,
I've never
do
had
you know
that.
when the moment that you first realized, like you were ready to make the change? When was that, like the clarity of like, wait, this is the change I need to make? Like you
So when I got clean the first time, I was 16.
And that was
And
when? 2012?
that was 2011.
2011. How old were
Yeah,
you then?
16.
So I got clean at the end. Wait, you're that young? I got clean at the
Yeah.
end of 2011, beginning of 2012. And I think I remember I would see like pictures of you. And I'm trying to remember. I remember just throughout the year seeing pictures of your like transition, But wait, you were 16 then?
Yeah, I was 16 then.
Oh my God, I thought you were going to tell me like 19, 20. Okay.
I
So
know.
wow, you were 16.
Yeah, so I
So
was
cool.
16 when I first got clean, and like I was in therapy, and like a lot of things that were required then when I started transitioning aren't really required now.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah, so like with hormone, I mean, depends on where you go, but like when I was going to go on hormones, like I was required to go through therapy with somebody that was specialized in diagnosing gender dysphoria and stuff like that because it's considered like a mental health issue, especially with not just like the physical dysphoria but like mentally, like same thing with addicts. It's
Yeah.
literally the same thing, just in a different aspect. And I had to go through therapy, and after a year of therapy is when I was like allowed to, per the therapist,
Okay.
go on hormones. And they do that because it's a life-changing decision.
Yeah.
And with that, there is side effects, and there's things that you can't reverse once you're on for a certain period of time. So like they want you to like be absolutely sure that like this is what you want. Because the thing that I found is there's even people that I know that like are a lesbian, and how people have like lingo for like studs and butch and things like
Yeah.
that. So there's ones that are like tomboyish that, never really got the opportunity to like figure out who they were, or things were stifled. And, they think that they're trans, and then they go through therapy and they're like, wow, like I'm actually just like queer. Or like,
Wow.
I'm just a lesbian that likes to dress like a boy. And like, imagine somebody going through a transition and not having those opportunities to go through therapy or talk with somebody
Absolutely.
that specializes in it to understand and like kind of work through those feelings to then like realize, I made a decision that like I might not be able to take back, that is going to make me feel worse. You know what I mean? So like I am grateful for that.
Wait,
But
do
like,
they not do that anymore? Did you say it's different now?
yeah, so some places, depending on where you go, do require it still, but a lot of places, even with people that I've seen transition, that I know and I'm friends with over the past couple of years, it's not. Like some people can kind of just go to somebody that does
You think
gender
that there
reassignment.
should be that time in there for them to talk?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that
Yeah.
there should be, just because even if you are like, I knew that
Yeah.
I probably was going to change my mind before starting therapy, but there's so many other things that I was able to work through and figure out that had to do with my dysphoria and being able to connect the dots to certain things that I don't think that I would have been able to if I hadn't done that. And I mean, with being on hormones, it's not just a physical change that happens. I mean, it affects your mental state,
I was going to say,
especially.
what happens mentally with that? What was like the hardest side effect mentally for you with the hormones, I guess?
So it was actually like the first probably month or so that I was on hormones. I mean, it was like super big mood swings, more than I've ever experienced
Wow.
before. A
Wow.
lot of anger and like rage and like aggression. And I don't know if it was just like my body kind of just trying to like level the estrogen and testosterone out, even starting at like a lower dose. But like there's also been times, I mean, even recently, like, when this pandemic first started, like the place that I go to for hormones is like for the LGBTQ community, but like a lot of things were shut down, or
Oh.
things were through health, and things that get shipped were like on pause for a minute, and I wasn't able to get my hormones. And it happened just at the time that I had to refill my hormones. So I had like abruptly stopped my hormones. And I wasn't able to get them for like a month and a
So what
half. And
happened? Is it
it
like when you
was
stop taking like antidepressant or something? Like,
I was like extra, like I like really thought that I was gonna have like a mental break. Like
oh
it's
my
just
God.
like really like affected me mentally and emotionally. I was like super emotional, like I was like crying. about things that I normally wouldn't even like bat an eye at. You know what I mean? I'm like watching YouTube with my but like things, and that's when I first started to notice it, and then like I just started to realize it's like a dip in my mood, and like I'm like pretty like generally even keel or like happy for the most part. Like, you know, I go through negative emotions, but like it really doesn't affect my overall mood day to day. And I really started to like feel depressed. All I wanted to do was sleep. I didn't want to be around anybody. I like had turned my phone off. Like I wouldn't talk to anybody. And it wasn't even because, yeah, it was for it was like a couple days at a time. And then I would, you know, talk and I would feel a little bit better. And then it would be the same thing. And, you know, I'd finally shared on a Zoom meeting about it because I mean, I typically don't share in meetings about my transition or being trans. And I like finally was just like, you know, I went to a meeting that happened to be a bunch of people that knew me when I first got clean. So a lot of them are new. And I was just like, look, like I am not okay right now. And, you know, like I don't have my medication and like it's not for my mental health, but it affects my mental health.
Of course,
after being on it for so many years consistently and then just like abruptly stopping. It's not like I'm like weaning myself in. Yeah. So it was a big hit and it took a couple weeks for me to like kind of get back to normal.
Like once you got back on them, it took a couple weeks to adjust.
Yeah, it took a couple weeks for me to like kind of like get used to being back on them again since I had went that long without being off of them. And I really hope that never has to happen again.
I was just saying, you have to take the hormones forever, right?
Yeah, so I mean, everybody's different. It depends on whatever doctor prescribes, but I take a shot subcutaneously once a week for pretty much forever.
Do they have anything out yet where, like, are they working on something where you could just like have something and it just knows when, like a pump, like a chip, and it just knows when to give you the hormone, you know?
I mean, that would be sweet.
I was just thinking that as you're talking, and you know, listen, scientists or anyone could give me some money for the patent, but I was just thinking like that would be genius, so no one had to worry about not taking it. I'm sure maybe if you like an insert, right?
Oh, yeah, it would be way easier because it is
like birth control. Isn't that what birth control is in a way? It's hormones, but it's just a different way.
Birth control like that, and I think it would be a lot easier because it does get frustrating at times, and you know, from time to time. And there are other methods, like there are people that go on hormones, and it's like a topical cream.
Oh,
I think they have I think they have a pill form now. Over the past couple years, but
yours is in a pill form.
No, so mine's a shot. Like I actually give myself a shot. Yeah. So, but the thing is with the shot compared to the topical, from what I've seen with studies, it's a slower change. It's a more gradual change over time. So like, you know, with somebody that's taking a shot, I mean, my voice dropped within like weeks of being on hormones when I first started. And, you know, it's the way your body reacts, like based on genetics and stuff like that. There's people I know that take hormones and like literally within like 6 months have like a full grown beard. It literally took me probably 4 or 5 years to
really
more than 2 pieces of hair on my chin. And now, I mean, I can grow like a full beard to like here, and it's like no big deal. But it took years for me to get to that point though.
So
and
I would do no shave November and get it long?
I haven't. I did have a pretty long beard a couple months ago. And then with the pandemic and everything with work, like having to wear the masks, they're like, anybody that has a beard, you have to shave your face because I guess it like cuts off, like it allows other things to come in. So I'd shave my face, but now we're starting to get to a point where things are opening. So I'm like, all right, like I might let it grow back a little bit. So I haven't shaved yet.
You haven't. I like it.
Yeah, I like the scruff look a little bit.
I like it. Now, what's been the hardest part of your transition journey?
I would probably say my dysphoria has probably been.
Can you explain that? So with the dysphoria? In general, like what is gender dysphoria? Can you explain that?
So for me, it's like, you know, some people have different aspects of it and some people like it affects everything. Some people it just affects, you know, certain parts. And like, you know, if you like listen to like other people talk about it, like some people will say like, I don't really have dysphoria with like the bottom half of my body. You know what I mean? And especially when it comes to, you know, like whether you have male genitalia or female genitalia, but like for me, like it's always been discomforting to me the most.
Interesting.
Not having top surgery and having to wear a binder to like rely on this like aesthetic physically.
Yeah.
And especially because, when I first started transitioning, it was like I didn't quite pass yet. Like I had long eyelashes and really feminine features, and I didn't have facial hair. So it didn't kind of like mask any of that. So it was in this limbo of like, is he a boy or is he a
How did you
girl? And like,
feel during that time? Did you feel secure, insecure, or like you didn't even know how
it
to
was,
feel?
it was like probably the most uncomfortable part of
It was.
my transition because I just like wanted to, like, I wanted to like, at least in my head, I was like, if I look the part, then like I won't have to deal with like, the way that people are outwardly, which maybe will help me feel better a little
Yeah.
bit on the inside, which it didn't. Even when I did pass, like, it's still a struggle and it's always like going to be
Have you?
like an ongoing thing. Like I go through times where like I go through really difficult times where like I think to myself, I'm like, it really sucks that I have to like depend on hormones to like be the person that I want to be for the rest of my life. Or, I have to depend on surgeries to like look the way that I want to look, that I view myself in my head, but like isn't what I look like outwardly, to the world or to like society and stuff like that. And with that comes a very large insecurity that like I can't, it doesn't matter how much like inner work I do on myself, like that's always going to be a part of who I am, because there's some things that I just can't change, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I have to be willing to like accept that that's a part of this process, and kind of like maneuver around what I can do to like outweigh those
Yeah.
cons come with it to make myself feel better. And the longer that I've transitioned and the longer that I've like done work on myself to like continue to dig deeper and figure out why things make me feel a certain way, even in life in general, but even when it comes to being trans, the more transparent I can be, and it doesn't affect me as much. But I still have my moments where like I can really get in a rut where I'm just like, I hate being trans, like I hate that
Wow.
this is
Really?
life, and like stuff like that. And like it's it happens probably every 6 months or so.
Every 6 months, you'd say?
Yeah, like I will go through these stages, and I can't say that it's because something specific happens. Like I think it's just like a mental thing, or like even who knows, maybe it's something that does happen and it's subconscious and I don't even realize that that's what sets it off for me to like go to that place. But I mean, it is difficult at times, especially to try to be open about it. At least for me, like I know a lot of people that are open about being trans, and like that hasn't really been my story.
So you weren't, so I know, because you were like, you never talked, but you felt ready to like talk about it on here. And so why didn't you just like, didn't want it, just, you just didn't care to, you didn't want to, nervous? Is there a reason why you were more just like not you were just being Zeke and not, talking about the transition
So
part?
I think part of it for me is the fact that, I have learned, and have noticed with some people over the years that like when somebody doesn't know that I'm trans and then finds out that I'm trans, it's like automatically like that's like the label that goes on me. It's not like
Really?
even third person. It's not like, oh, like, do you know Zeke? It's
Yeah.
so like you know Zeke the trans guy, or something that revolves around that. And it's
Yeah.
not that I think that's a negative thing, because I'm proud of being trans, but it's
Yeah.
just the fact of like, why does that have to be a way to describe, like, if I talk about anybody else that's like a cis woman or a cis man, like I'm not saying to them like, oh, do you know that like biological
Yeah.
male named Kevin, or like whatever, you know what I mean? Like I just
Yeah.
like don't, it's hard for me to understand that. So like that was part of it, but also too just like experiences with like being discriminated against
I was
for
going to
being.
say, did you have any, adversity? Did you face adversity with this when it came out? A lot of it, a medium?
So there's, the first time that I like openly went by Ezekiel or Zeke in a meeting was like around the time that I started hormones. And for the most part, people were on board. Some people were a little bit confused, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But even like months after the fact, there was people that like I knew and wouldn't say I was friends with, but like acquaintances with, that like I had like respect for, that like refused to call me Zeke or to go by male pronouns. And
Fucking
like it
asshole.
was like, really offensive to me
Yeah.
because in my head, it's not even so much of like, you know, how dare you, but it was more so the fact of like their excuse when their conversation came up was, you know, like I know you as Morgan. So like that's what it is. Like as if like you get the right to like call me
Right.
what I want to be called. You know, and it would be the same thing if it was them, even if it was a nickname that they don't want to be called. And the way that I look at it is my head is I'm like, if my own parents that, you know, birthed me and raised me, you know, and had to deal with all these challenges of like, how do I, you know, have a trans kid and like, how do I go about this to like be loving and caring and be supportive while also going through their own process of it, can try to like change calling me the name that they named me and have called me my whole life, like, and do a pretty good job out of it. Like somebody that has only known me for a short period of time could like do the same thing. So like that definitely affected me. And then work. Like I've had jobs through the years where like I've had issues of, you know, who knows whether it's because I was biologically born a female or if it's just because it's, you know, in my nature to like have, you know, flamboyant or feminine mannerisms, you know what I mean? And it's something that comes up all the time. And, you know, people assume I'm gay or, you know, people that know me that I'm trans, they're like, oh, well, this is why. And like, you know, I had a situation, I worked for a corporate company for like 3 years. And, you know, this was like right before I relapsed too. And it got to a point where like a new guy was hired and I worked in the same place with the same two guys for all this time. And nobody knew that I was trans. I never disclosed it. I never do
Yeah.
because there's no reason for me to.
No.
You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with how I perform my job.
Yeah.
You know, and like I was a great employee. I got promoted plenty of times, like all this good stuff. And, you know, this guy came in and he would like constantly say stuff about like my mannerisms and stuff like that. Or he would be like, well, dude, are you gay? And like,
Really?
you know, and like eventually
How old
it
was
turns
he?
he was in his 30s, like mid 30s. And the thing that was frustrating was so he ended up finding out that I was trans through somebody that he ended up being related to that's in the program that has like 30 some years that I didn't even know that
Holy
and
shit.
they knew me or like of me.
Yeah.
And you know, it became this like whole thing and he like wouldn't let it go. And it started to really make me feel uncomfortable at work. And I started to like get to a place where like I felt unsafe at work because that's like a real thing that happens. You know what I mean? People like intimidating people or trying to like threaten them.
I actually
You know,
thought you were gonna say, like, my mouth just dropped that like he like apologized, like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, like to make you uncomfortable. He
no.
like continued.
Yeah, he continued and got to the
Motherfucker.
like I was like super torn about it. Like I talked to my sponsor. I was like having conversations with my sister and my parents because I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like I like my job. And you know, I don't want to have to like it like sucks because I'm like, it sucks that I have to like out myself when I shouldn't
Horrible.
have to like a corporate setting just to like get, you know, the whole thing rectified. And I ended up having to like email my supervisor and like his boss and then
Yeah.
his boss like all on an email. And like I sat for like hours writing out this email, deleting stuff, retyping it. And you know, like I sat like paragraphs and paragraphs and you know, like I had to out myself to them in the whole thing of the email to kind of get my point across of why this was affecting me so much and why I felt the way that I did. And, you know, granted, the head supervisor, like the very, very top one, had actually called me that night. It was like 9 o'clock at night that I had sent the email. So I wasn't expecting to hear from anybody until the next day, but I guess he got it. He called me that night and he was like so apologetic and was like, I'm so sorry that this is even happening. Like, we don't stand for this. And, you know, we talked on the phone for like an hour and he was like, you know, like I never knew. And I apologize that you had to like go through this length to even, you know, have to like get this situation figured out. And he ended up having a conversation with him. I mean, like, that's like a whole nother thing too, is like nothing really happens.
Nothing happened. They didn't like.
Yeah, like, you know, there was a conversation. He like half-ass apologized, and like that was that. You know what I mean? Like that was the end of that. And at that point, I ended up leaving there shortly after that. Like I just didn't want to be there anymore because I'm like it's changed the environment. But before I had went to the job that I'm at now, it was the same thing. I was there for I don't know, maybe 3 weeks, and I quit because I was it was a job in my hometown, and I was super nervous about it because I'm like, there's so many people I went to school with that know that I'm trans. And,
Yeah.
before, like, living out in Horsham and stuff like that, I didn't know anybody because I didn't grow up there. It
Yeah.
wasn't anybody out there. So nobody knew anything about me. And, from that experience, it made me nervous. And it just so happens I didn't know anybody that worked for the company except for this one guy that I knew in high school and was friends with. And, we were like out in Delaware or something like that. And they had like a bunch of, guys that were subbing in, I guess, from like a temp agency or whatever with the company. And a bunch of them started making same thing, slurs, and like calling me gay and like this and that.
Really?
And yeah, and one guy ended up at lunch break because I like kind of dispersed from everybody and just kind of walked away because I'm just like in my head I was like, why is this like a thing? Like, why is this happening? Like
That's
when I like had
horrible. Why is this happening?
exactly. And some guy came up to me that was like kind of like he never really was talking to any of the guys anyways when we were working together. And he was like, I hope you know that like I understand, like what you're going through. Like I guess like he was gay.
So it's
And
not just
he
bullying like high school though.
I know, but I was taken back because I'm like,
Wow.
in my head, I was like, what do you mean you know what I'm going through? Because I never said that I was gay. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
never agreed to any of these things that I'm being called. And, we ended up talking, and it happened that I wasn't like around the area, and the guy that I went to school with was talking about how we went to school together and like how I used to be a girl. And a lot of guys felt uncomfortable about it. Why? I couldn't tell you. Somebody else's discomfort isn't really my problem.
I know.
Um, but like that's what started the whole situation. And I had called the office because I was like, like this is like ridiculous. And they literally were just like, oh, well, you can come back to the office if you want. Nothing happened. So I ended up coming. I drove back and I went into HR and I was like, look, here's my work phone. Here's the keys to my work truck. Like, I'm done. Like, I'm not working here. And the lady just like kind of stared at me because she didn't know like what to do. But I'm just like, at this point, like, I don't want to work for a company
No.
like you because you don't even know how to handle
Don't
a
even know how to-
situation or to even ask me how I'm affected or how I feel. So I'm like, you would rather lose a good employee than like actually deal with a serious situation that's a real problem in the world. Not just now, but, like all the time. And, like that was like my last encounter with that. And I mean, it's because
That's
of
your
things.
last encounter?
What's that?
That was your last encounter with anything like that? Any adversity for that and the
For
workforce?
the most, for the most part, yeah. Like there's people that will make comments and like give their opinion about certain things where it's not asked all the time. And I kind of just like brush it off. Because like at the end of the day, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Like at the end of the day, like I can only do what I can to like live my life to the best of my ability to like be happy with myself. And but I will say that it's shitty too though. To be in this mentality, like it's, like you become so accustomed to things like that when you live in certain areas or just in general of people being like that, that it kind of becomes like a subconscious thing. Like I like will stifle certain things and I don't even realize that I do out of like, just the back of my mind of being like, well, this is what's going to be safe for me. Because even like
Wow.
a teenager, like my dad would say the same things to me. And it wasn't because he didn't agree, but he was worried about something happening to me. Because I mean, for me, and I'll go back to this with everything going on, like I'm biracial. I live in a predominantly white area and it's always been that way. So it's already been uncomfortable growing up to begin with. And I've dealt with things like that. So it's not like I don't know how to handle it. And I think that that's why I don't kind of flip out because it's almost normal to me and in a really fucked up way.
Yeah.
So with that, my dad worried about between that and then now being trans and like you see hate crimes on the news and stuff like that. And like we have known people in our family, you know what I mean, that like live in the city and like stuff like that. So he's like, I just want you to be careful, like wherever you go and like be mindful of like your surroundings and stuff like that. And it's just sad that like, that's the way that I have to think. And in my head, I'm like, it's easier for me to not truly be who I am in an open setting and just portray myself as this cis man because that's what the world wants to see. And that's what makes everybody comfortable, to not have to worry about like being, profiled or whatever because I'm trans.
That is like my hope and trying to help change the world. Do you know what I mean? I just like want everyone to be happy and be who they are. you know? And I was thinking when you're talking about
Yeah.
those guys at your last job, how many years was that?
So that was almost 3 years ago now.
3 years ago. I was just thinking in my head whether this is spiritual or not. You know, I have my other crazy side. I'm like, sometimes people need prayed for and they need things, but sometimes people just need their fucking ass whooped. I'm sorry.
Hands down, I trust me, I'm with you. And if I
Sometimes you just need to fucking beat something into so I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
no,
Judge me, but
no,
please.
no, trust me, I think this sometimes that's my first thought when it comes to certain things, because it's just like that's what other people think and they think that it's okay, but it's like God forbid
Yeah.
somebody do them. And
And I
it's funny.
can't,
Go
no,
ahead.
no, you go ahead. See, we'll talk forever. You go ahead.
I know. I was just gonna say it's funny because me and my sister were just having a conversation earlier about this, and like I said, like same thing like how I said earlier about like somebody else's discomfort isn't my problem, but it's true. Like just like if I feel uncomfortable about something because of who you are, like that's not your problem. You know what I mean? Like I'll deal with that. But like, which really there's not much that makes me uncomfortable. But like at the end of the day, it's hard for me to not be angry, even in the world that we live in today, when it's like, what I do with my life doesn't affect like you having a place to live, doesn't affect your job or like your finances or, or your marriage or your relationship or your kids. So like, why are you so worried about like what I do with my life and how I carry myself and how I dress and, do whatever to like make myself feel good or make myself feel like myself, when like it has nothing to do with you, but like that's like what reality is. It's like people are like, oh, well, I feel uncomfortable about this because I don't think it's right. So you shouldn't be allowed to do this.
It's the craziest thing I ever like can't get beyond that. And like when people do judge or they make fun of or they make these assumptions, like, or they're just like again judging you because of your skin color, your sexual orientation, or whatever, like I just don't understand that. I guess is my head is like I like I guess what am I trying to say here? I feel like all the words are coming out. I just don't understand that sort of thought process. I like, do they not know like someone like I guess they just have no idea what it'd be like. And truly, I don't really either to just like walk up and have to be worried if I'm going to be served in a restaurant because of the way I look.
Mm-hmm.
And if people that are listening that like want to judge or whatever, like imagine being that. Try to put yourself in that kind of category over like the most ridiculous thing just because of the way you look, and I hope that people were so much beyond our skin.
Yeah, I completely agree with
Our
you.
clothes.
And I think seriously though, and I mean it goes hand in hand with, with everything. Like I know that it's like trending right now, even though this is like a real thing previous to all this happening. But like, and I hate to like get into politics, but like, I mean, it's like a real thing. This like whole thing with, like the president overturning rights for LGBTQ.
Oh my God. So wait, yes, that's like when that means it's like overturned now, right? Or does it have to go through some more stuff to be fully overturned?
The Supreme Court actually just went through a thing from, I think it was 1964 for civil rights. So it is a good thing, but it also is still kind of shitty because the reality is like, yeah, now I can be in a workplace where I can't be discriminated against, and I have rights to that. But like, I could still go somewhere, somebody that's in drag or, somebody that's like, for like, if I was just beginning my transition and I didn't pass at all and somebody felt uncomfortable by that, or even now, if I went somewhere where somebody happened to know me and knew that I was trans, could say, hey, like you can't eat here because I don't like trans people or I don't like gay people. So
Wait,
like,
so they can do that now again.
Yeah, it's only for healthcare right now. So like, before it was like, if I went to the emergency room and I obviously identify as a trans man, you know what I mean? Like they could decline care for me because they don't agree with it or they don't feel comfortable with that. And which is absurd to me, but that was overturned. So that, I mean, we do have rights for that, and not just trans people, but the whole LGBTQ community. But there's way more that needs to be done. And when I think of that, it's just hard for me to understand the thought process of that while other people get to live their best life, you know what I mean? And be who they are and do what they want to do with no judgment whatsoever. It's crazy.
You know what? As you're thinking, I love the more that I know that I make someone uncomfortable, the more I like it. And I'm like, you know what? I should get
100%.
I should get like a bunch of people, like different, like trans men, women, and we should just go to like the most white like country club ever. You know what I mean? Like go out to eat or stuff. I would love every minute of that.
I mean, I won't even lie. There's like a couple places, like around where I grew up that are still like that. It's like it's all like countries, valleys, fields around where I'm at. It's like a small town. And like a lot of them are like mom and pop owned, like diners and stuff like that. And a lot of them are known even since I was a kid for, being racist or profiling people. And I like will still go to some of those places
Yeah,
guys feel like to prove a point, you know what I mean?
absolutely.
Like, and it's funny because one of the places that I do go to, it's like uncomfortable sometimes being there. Even when I go with like a group of friends, but like I have a friend that I grew up with that's also mixed that like manages there. And like people will like give dirty looks, like, like she's like a server or whatever. And she's like, no, like I have a salary. Like they're paying me to like run this shithole pretty much. You know what I mean? Like, and that, like, but that's what I think about. And I do. And it's not even so much like part of it is because I'm like, it is amusing to me kind of to see how ridiculous people act if they're not like them. But it's more so just the fact, too, of like, just because you don't like something, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of like not eating here because my money enough for you because I'm trans or, biracial or whatever. Like, I think that that's furthermore what creates that whole dynamic is people are too afraid or intimidated to stand up to it. And I do understand in certain situations, but because of that, it almost gives them more leverage to be like, hold this over their head and know that people will be like, okay, well, if we do this, they'll leave and they won't come back again. And 9 times out of 10, people won't go to those places that are aware that they're like that, which is, I mean, it's sad, but that's reality.
Yeah. Now, do you think like with the COVID, with the rallies, the protests, everything, do you think now again at LGBTQ, I know that we're still not even close to fighting half the battle, but do you think this has opened up a lot of doors for LGBTQ and like maybe starting to like expose? Because right now I think what's happening is we're exposing all of the unfairs of the world, right? And like, look, this is actually what's happening to different groups of people. Like, so maybe in a way, I think that that's a good thing too to start, getting everyone's rights up there.
Yeah. I do think that it's starting to bring about more aware. I mean, I think it's sad that it took people in a lockdown to kind of, because that's really like what it comes down to is, like it became this big thing. And I can't speak for other people, but that's like really what it seems like is, even people that I know that like don't get involved in things, or like have very strong opinions that are now the opposite. I'm like, it took us being locked down, having nothing to do, being stuck with kids, whoever it is that you live with to like pay attention to like what is really going on around us. Because like, and I think about this when we first went into the pandemic, like even being in meetings, it's like you don't realize how unhappy you are with your life until this happened because it's like you're so used to like the monotony of like this routine and like getting up every day and running and running and running, whether it's work, kids, parents, whatever, and you don't really have like a minute to chill. And even if you do, you're doing something to distract yourself. And like now we don't have that opportunity. So it's like you're stuck with like, what is my life? Like, do I actually like my husband? Do I actually like my wife? Do I like my kids? You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Yeah, seriously though, and it's like stuff like that. And it's like this realization where it makes me sad that that's what it took. But at the end of the day, now that we're there, I'm at least glad that it's happening to bring that attention. And I think that with that, the more that protests are going and the more sadly fucked up shit that keeps happening and airing and, being shared on social platforms and stuff like that is heartbreaking. But the more that that's being shared and people are willing to protest and go out, the more strong attention and the more that people are being canceled and things are getting backlash. Like Congress and people in politics really don't have a choice but to address it because they're like, it all comes down to money. Like, when businesses start losing money and things start happening and it's not COVID anymore, it becomes a bigger issue. And it's sad that that's what it makes it, become this thing. But that's like really what it's stemming from. And you have seen slight change with certain things, not enough to actually call it change.
Yeah.
Like we're in the progress of
We're
it, and I
starting
think
the movement.
exactly. And I am hopeful that this generation that's coming up, and even, in my age group too, and for you, it's like, it's like, I feel like people that grew up and around my age and like a little bit older, it's like you were stuck. You might not have grown up in all the 90s, but like you were stuck in between the people that grew up in the 70s and the 80s. And you kind of had like a little bit of both. And like
Yeah.
now the generation that's coming up, it's like something that we're not used to. Like I see my nephew and nieces, and it's nothing like what I was used to in my childhood. And a lot of it I don't understand and I don't know. But the one thing I have realized is a lot more of them are not in agreement with the way that their parents raised them as far as thought process and things,
Yeah.
even how I was raised, which makes me happy. And I also noticed that they're more outspoken. They're more vocal with how they feel about things, whether it's politics, human rights,
Yeah.
and they're way more open about it than anybody, even when I was a teenager was or was willing to be. And I think
I feel
because of
like
that,
your age group and people like that are 18, 19, 20 are way more outspoken than we were, like even care way more than we cared,
yeah. I mean, and I agree too. Like it's like funny because I think the same thing. Like you know, will always go out and advocate for whatever. And, like I said before, like working for a campaign in the city, like I'll do things to the best of my ability that I can get my hands in, you know, to try and make change, not just for me that it personally affects me, but for other people. Because I mean, I don't like, some people, but I can't really say that I hate anybody. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't even come down to like that personal thing of it. It really comes down to the fact that like I know how it feels to be mistreated for being who I am. And even if somebody isn't the same way as I am, like I can't get with disagreeing or taking things from somebody just because it might not be how I live my life or who I am, you know?
I 100% agree with that. Now, besides that, everyone in the community LGBTQ deserves the exact, and everyone, every color, race deserve all the same rights in general. Okay. I want to say that 100%. In your community, what's the next step towards getting that? Like, what do you think, again, like, what is the next thing do you think everyone like needs towards your freedom? I guess is what like, what's the next progression?
I mean, part of it is, the Equality Act that Mitch McConnell just blocked, along with a lot of other things that are sitting on the Senate floor. But, that's a big part of it because it covers more than just, being denied
Wow.
healthcare
Okay.
and things like that. And I think to really be able to see a change where like we get the same rights that, anybody else gets, like, the same rights that my dad would get or my mom would get or, my straight sister would get. Like we deserve to get the same things just because we're literally the same people, just because we
Same.
choose
Yeah.
love a different gender, you know what I mean? Or to dress a certain way or whatever, like doesn't make us any different. And we should be allowed to, like, it's ridiculous that we're even fighting for this. You know what I mean? That this is a real thing. But I think that would be the next move. I mean, there's a lot of other things that need to be covered. But I think right now, that's the biggest thing because hate crimes have always been a thing, but it's progressing more and more. And now it's becoming a lot louder and it's becoming a lot more mainstream because technology is advanced. Things are being recorded. And, now that everything's happening, things are being blown up. And I'm glad that it is because it's bringing attention to it. But like, it gets to a point where, we shouldn't have to fear wherever we go, whatever state we go to, because, we don't have certain rights that normal people have, or, people think that they can be treated a certain way because they don't agree with it. And that's like really what it is now is like, even with this thing that was overturned with the Supreme Court, like you're basically saying that, as a trans man, if I get hit by a car and I'm bleeding out or I have like severe brain damage or something, and you could potentially save my life, I come get brought into the hospital, and because I'm trans and you don't agree with that, or, you feel disgusted by that or whatever, you could say, you know what I mean? Like you might have to go to another hospital because
Oh my God.
like, and same thing with even seeing a doctor, like about like normal, regular things. Like, I just think that it's ridiculous that this is even a real thing that like I have to worry about that when like anybody else can go to the hospital for whatever and it's no big deal. But like that's like ultimately what it comes down to. So I think when we start to see a change with that, I'm not going to say we're going to be happy because obviously we want more than that and we
Yeah.
deserve more than that. But that at least it at least shows that somebody's listening to us and hears us and is willing to do something to make a difference that is long overdue.
So long overdue. And I want to ask like those people, I was just thinking like, I was always picturing you in a scenario, no offense, sitting on the side of the road with your head like bleeding out. And I was like thinking to myself, if someone really would stop that, like I would want to just pull them aside, like really what happened to you in your childhood that would make you so angry and hateful and cold and like, I just don't understand that. I personally think within 300 or 400 years, we're going to be a one sex race anyways, or one like unified, you know, honestly, I do. We're made of feminine and masculine energy not one race. I'm sorry. Well, that too, actually one race, but I was meaning one gender, basically. That might be 4 or 5 years, but like, because we can have both, you know, it's just like.
And I completely agree. And I think, you know, the thing with it too is that people that are like that, like, you're not born a bigot.
No, you're not. You're not
born racist. You're not born transphobic or, you know, homophobic or any of these things. Like those are taught things. And I think the thing that makes it worse is, you know, people that aren't willing to address when somebody says something because it's uncomfortable, because that's the biggest thing. People don't know how to communicate. And not even on this, in general, not even talking about this. They don't know how to communicate. And when something makes them uncomfortable, it's like, you know, naturally, like, let me pull back because what if I get too deep or, you know, what if I offend somebody? And it's like, the reality is like, who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, allow yourself to feel something, like allow yourself to have a conversation with somebody that's more than just small talk and bullshit. When like 9 times out of 10, you don't give a shit about how their day's going. So stop asking, you know what I mean? And that's what it is. And until people are willing to do that, people that are raised like that don't even realize that's how they are. It becomes the norm. And then, you know, it's not until somebody brings it up and then being willing to hear somebody out without it being an argument. You know what I mean? Like I had I guess it was last weekend, I went to a protest and, you know, I ended up having a conversation with this woman that was there. And, you know, she was kind of like in the middle, like she was like trying to like educate herself a little bit, but also had her own views. And, you know, like I was like taken back because she was an older woman, probably around my parents' age, like in her 60s or whatever. And I'm not even gonna lie, I was full on expecting, you know, either an argument or her to like just give me her opinion without even letting me speak. And, you know, she sat down, we were like in this pavilion area. It was after the walk and the protest ended. And she said, hey, like, can I like talk to you guys for a minute? It was me and another friend of mine. And she was like, I just like want to have a conversation and like understand where your guys' thought process is at. And like, maybe I can like share some of my thoughts with you and we can have like an actual conversation. And let me tell you, I sat and I talked to this lady for probably about an hour and we went back and forth. I've never had a civil conversation with somebody about politics that I don't know. And, you know, politics, we talked about Black Lives Matter. We talked about, you know, her growing up, you know, her being married to a Jewish man, like all these that we touched on so many different topics and not once did we get into an argument. There was things that she didn't agree with. There was things that I didn't agree with. And not once was I like, all right, well, conversation's over. We're not on the same page. Yeah. And we just had a conversation. And at the end of the day, we were both able to agree on the fact that things that are going on aren't okay, regardless of other vast things that we might not agree on. And that like there's something that needs to happen that's different. And like the fact that she's out there at 60 something years old with whatever views that she has, still willing to go protest with, I mean, majority of everybody there was like my age. Wow. You know, early 30s, or like there was even teenagers. There was kids that were like 16, 17 years old with signs walking around. And, you know, like that really gave me something inside because it's like, you know, that's what it takes, whether it took her kids having a conversation with her or whatever, for it to reach somebody. Like, you know, next week, that could be more people that are like her. that start to like develop this mentality of like, I might not understand, but like, let me go out and try, because the point of the protest isn't going out and parading, just be a part of it.
Yeah.
Understand why you're protesting, educate yourself on why you're protesting, whether it's Black Lives Matter or, LGBTQ rights. It's all the same thing. It's all the same general thing. We just want to be treated just like you guys are treated. You know what I mean? And if somebody can get on that page of it and understand like, hey, like maybe the way that I was raised was like this false identification, because I know for me, excluding this, like I was given a lot of wrong information, and it's not because it was purposeful, but because they were given the wrong information with whatever their parents had to give them and weren't aware of it. And because of that, it affected me in other areas. And at some point it becomes your job to, undo those things. Like at 25 years old, I can't sit here and say anymore, I had this trauma, this happened, and this person treated me this way and whatever. So it's okay for me to not like this person or to do whatever. Like that means that I need to be made aware of that, and I need to acknowledge it and be willing to do something to change that, especially if it's something that affects other people. Like I'm intentionally causing harm that doesn't need to happen to people that somebody could be doing to me, but I'm not thinking about it because it's not affecting me. And that's exactly where we're at right now.
And I think you touched on one of the most important things, and I say this a lot, is having that conversation and that understanding and talking about the uncomfortable things. It's uncomfortable for, I'm sure, people to, for white people to sit down and say, yeah, actually, I have no idea what's going on. I've been totally ignorant to it. And like, and it's hard for people to, like, again, we have to sit down, we have to talk just like you did. I mean, that's amazing. And talk through the uncomfortableness of the elephant in the room of whatever it is, whether it's, how you identify or your race or whatever, like every side, whatever side there is, needs to like sit and talk.
Yeah.
Right. And like people who don't understand need to ask questions. And I said this in a couple episodes ago when all the everything first took off with all the protests and stuff. And I said, and I grew up in the country in the middle of nowhere, and thank God I had very liberal parents. But like if you were raised racist or bigot or scared or whatever, like you can change your mind. Like you don't have to like, and if you're listening to this, you don't have to, and I think it's important, go on those beliefs, or you don't have to because you maybe feel guilty of believing all these one things. So you don't have to stay in that mindset. You can talk and forgive. And I mean, like have people forgive you. Like you can work past that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you have those beliefs or you grew up with those beliefs.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, it might not be easy depending on, how long in your life you go through it. But I mean, I think of it too. Like, my mom grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, which was a very racist area. Lynching happened, all those things.
Wow. Now, is your mom white? Because you said you're biracial.
Yeah, my mom's white, my dad's black. Okay. So, my dad grew up down south on a farm, you know what I mean, in the 50s. And, when I think of it, like my grandma, I mean, I never got to have a relationship with her. Like she died, I want to say 2 years ago now. And I never got to have a relationship with her because she was so like, my mom was raised that way to like, not like, you know what I mean? Black people and this stereotype. And like, she married a black man, you know what I mean? Like my parents got married, I think it was 7 years after interracial, marriage was recognized, like was legal.
Holy shit.
And they've met at 17 or 18, and then they got married, and they've been together since. It's been like 47 years. And nothing's changed. Like I think of that, and it's like my mom was able to remove herself from that situation. And even through that, like I know that like my mom goes through this process of like never getting to see her mom, and this relationship that they had that wasn't really a relationship, but she wanted even as an adult, because my grandma wasn't willing to agree with her marrying a black man and having biracial kids.
Oh my God.
And because of that, like it furthermore shows me that like, obviously there's somewhere that you can make a disconnect if that's really what you choose to do. Because she was raised the same way that other people that end up being racist and stuff like that. And that ended up not being the case. You know what I mean? Because she whatever process she had to go through. And I don't know what age she was when she hit that process as a teenager or even before that, where she realized, everybody's the same and I love
Wow.
people and,
Yeah.
this and that, and it's not a big deal. Thank God for that, because
Thank
here I
God.
am. You know what I mean? Like,
That's really, I mean, that's beautiful.
in a cocky way.
Yeah.
That kind of came off a little condescending.
No,
But
we're happy you're here. Love that you're born.
seriously, but I think of that and I'm just like, I know that there's other people besides my mom that exist that are like that. And it takes, somebody stepping out of their comfort zone. I think, that was me all throughout high school. I got bullied. I was expelled from school, you know what I mean? All these things and was mistreated. But I never stopped being willing to be vocal about how I felt when it came to certain things, even in meetings. It's still the same thing now. I'll never stop. I don't care if I'm in a room before I went off social media, I think I posted this, you know what I mean? And it's just the way that I was raised. I don't care if I stand by myself and people judge me and nobody agrees with me. If I feel firmly about something that moves my spirit and is passionate and I believe is right, and especially even more if it affects me, that's what I'm going to stand behind. And I'm going to voice that and stand up for other people.
Oh yeah.
Regardless of what it is. And that's what it takes right now is other people, even if it doesn't personally affect them, being willing to be advocates, to be allies, to understand, and educate themselves to be of more help and service to other people. You know what I mean? Because those same people would be doing the same thing if roles were reversed. I know I would if roles were reversed.
Absolutely. Wow. That was, where I'm laughing. That was absolutely 100%. You were so amazing. We're getting to the end of our episode. I'm like, wow, we're going to have another one. Season 2. There's still so much, there's so many questions. I want to go over lingo. So we're going to have a part 2, coming up. So this will be at the end of season 1. So I'll have to have you, and then maybe we could do season 2 in person. My season 2.
Yeah, no, I would love that.
So at the end of every episode, I ask 3 questions. Okay. So the first question, if we could go back to, I don't know, any part in your childhood when you needed it, your inner child, wherever it was, what would you go back and say to them if you could?
I think if I knew then what I know now, I think that I would tell them to, to ride it out and that it would get better and that there would be hope on the other side of, what was to come next, where I didn't have to go through or put myself in situations on purpose to try to feel better or to get through certain things that I was just unaware of at that time. That's probably what I would say.
Aw, I love that. Now, what's the best piece of advice anyone's ever given you?
I think the best piece of advice somebody's ever given me is you can cut anything and anybody out of your life anytime that you want without an explanation.
Fuck yeah, I love that. Yes.
My favorite thing.
Yes. And people get pissed about that, but I'm a believer in that because I know just for I am I'm always forgiving or fully invested. I can't just be in between. Especially if it's not good for me, I got to just cut it.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I feel. I know for me, I feel things on an intense level. I think on an intense level, and it makes people uncomfortable. Yeah, and it makes people uncomfortable sometimes. They can't get that deep, and I've had situations like that. But I think at the end of the day, for me, if you can't at least try to be on the same page with me, I always want more. You know what I mean? I want you. I want to continuously grow. Even if I meet goals, I want to continue going. I want to know more. I want to learn more. And if you can't be on the same page as that, or at least want that, then there's really no point of us even having any kind of relationship, whether it's romantic or, friendship or even with family. And it's funny, I'll say this really quick. I think of that with dating, because I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day, and it's it's funny because it's dating's so weird. And
are you dating now? Are you single? Are you quarantine dating?
I'm single right now, but I'm openly dating. I'm talking to somebody right now. And
to one or a couple? A couple people or one?
To just one.
Okay, good.
So I'm
or whatever. You could have multiple.
I know, right? I'm in this situation where I'm just in my head, I'm like, do you know how great it would feel to just like when you start talking to somebody and you're like beating around the bush and they're like, hey, how are you? Or like this and that. And I'm like, well, can I really tell you how I'm doing? Like, let me just like lay it all out. And
Yeah.
if someone was to perceive that and be like, you know what? Like, I kind of feel that because I think of that and I'm like, I wish that somebody would say that to me because I would literally, I wouldn't be like, all right, well, not for me. Like I think it's time.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably be like, we should probably go get married now because like I think that this is it. I think this is it. You're the one. We're soulmates. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's you can't do that because people just don't know how to. I feel like people struggle with connecting
People
on
struggle
that.
so bad with connecting. It's insane. That's what I live for. I don't know how to not connect with people. I don't do well with people if I can't connect with them.
Same,
In a deep
same.
level, I make people very uncomfortable all the time.
No, I'm same exact thing, and I love it. And it's not even because I want to make somebody feel uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
it's more so the fact of like I feel like you, at least for me, like I know I would want to be challenged. So like you should challenge people to step outside of their comfort zone. And like if they're not going to do it, that's fine. That's on them and that's their choice. But like we're always going to live in this bubble, each individual person, if nobody ever challenges us to like step outside of that. And like I'm glad that people challenged me to like really get in touch with myself, like because I found this deeper level to myself that I'd been hiding that I never really realized. And now I'm like, there's like so much freedom that comes with it. And if only other people were willing to tap into that, you know?
Oh my God, so much freedom comes with that. I swear. Now, what is the last piece of advice that you want to leave for our listening audience?
I think I would probably say that not even just in regards to this, you know, like what our general topic was, but just in general to like, you know, like really take some time to sit with yourself and talk to kind of like decipher things and understand things and talk to some people, have some conversations with people that you don't normally talk to and get to know somebody. I try and identify, you know, even if it's not the same thing, everybody can identify in certain things. And that's the beginning of communication when we're able to like have that open line with each other and like let people feel comfortable and not intimidated. And when that happens, change starts to happen because we're able to reach other levels of issues and things when people are just open. You know what I mean? Like people need to have openness. And you know, so I would say like talk to somebody, call somebody you've never called before. You know what I mean? Talk to somebody behind you at the gas station. You
I
know what I
love
mean?
that.
You know, simple things like that. You never know what's going to make somebody's day or like shift things for you because I believe that like people think that like everything's so cut and dry and it's like everything is always up for a revision. Like I could plan my whole day out for tomorrow and I could make one decision or be somewhere later than I was supposed to. And it totally changes the way that my day goes and not necessarily my mood, but like everything changes. And that's just the way that life works. So like if we can change the way that we interact with people, even strangers, then, you know, like it changes things, even if it's at a smaller part of it. And then it eventually grows into bigger changes.
Oh my God, that's huge. It grows into such bigger changes. And I often tell people, and you too, I'll tell you the same thing. Find everyone has such a different story, but so kind of wild and good and like open and raw. Like on my podcast, I say, find a story that you normally wouldn't listen to in your review of a person, whoever they are, and click on it. And it will bring a totally different, open-minded perspective.
Yeah, I
You know,
100% agree with that.
the good, the bad, the ugly. All right. Now, Zeke, you're currently off social media. This will be out in a couple of weeks. So I don't know if you'll be back on, but if anyone wants to reach out to you, I mean, you know, you have a wealth of information and help. I know you have for a lot of people. Like, what's your email, social media? How can someone find you?
So I mean, I can always like, I really don't care about my number going out there. That's not a big deal to me.
Yeah.
Which you have, but I mean, my email, I'm not on social media like Instagram or Facebook anymore. And honestly, I probably won't be. But I do have Twitter,
I'll have
which
to
my
find you
Twitter,
on Twitter.
yeah, which my Twitter handle is Ezekiel Maxwell 3. So you can, you know, private message me on there. You can follow me, whatever. We can kind of go back and forth with retweets about, you know, anything.
You can
You
always
know,
reach
or
out to me if you would also like to reach out to him.
oh yeah, that too. You know, you can always reach out to Colleen and get a hold of
And
me
what's your
that way.
email?
It's Ezekiel j.maxwell@outlook.com. So you can email me whenever. I check my email pretty often. So whenever, but I'm always open to, even if it's not in relation to this, if you just want to make me friends. Yeah, I'm always open to meet new people and experience new conversations.
Last question. How'd you choose Ezekiel? Ezekiel. I can never say that full. That's why I only say Zeke. I had Ezekiel.
Yeah, no, a lot of people actually go through that. So, and I think that's really why the whole Zeke thing started, because somebody ended up being like, I just call you Zeke. And I'm like, all right, well, that fits.
Yeah.
And it kind of after that. But so me and my mom were talking about names, and my parents were like, well, you could just keep your name because it's gender neutral. It could be a boy name. And I'm like, yeah, but it just doesn't, it never felt right. And you know what I mean? And even for transitioning, I'm like, this just does not feel like my name. And, my mom grew up Christian and all this stuff. So like my mom always brought it back, like, all right, well, what about a Bible name? I'm like,
that's sweet.
I'm not opposed to it, but like I was like, I don't want a name that's like, a generic name. Like I want something that like fits me, because I don't like, my personality and my sense of humor isn't just this like average, though, at least the way that I view myself. Like I have a very loud, obnoxious.
Here we are for it.
Exactly. And I wanted something that was not necessarily loud and obnoxious, but I wanted something that wasn't like the typical name that you see on a regular basis. And like, my mom had ended up saying Ezekiel, and it literally, like, my whole body just got chills. And right then and there, I was like, you know what? I feel like that is what I want my name to be. And, that's what I ended up going with. And I went to a meeting a couple days after that, and I introduced myself as that. And let me tell you, like, it literally felt like I like had arrived, like everywhere to be, like my whole life. Like it felt right. Like I didn't think twice about it. Like, and even when I started going by Ezekiel, like I never once, like people would say my birth name, and I wouldn't even like turn around, because it was like gone, you know what I mean? Like more, like who was that? And yeah, seriously, that's like what it was. And after that, like I was just like, like I know that I made the right decision, and I fell in love with the name. It made me feel like one with myself even more, and that's kind of like how it stuck since then. Yeah.
Wow. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I've only ever known one other Zeke, and he reminds me a lot of you in the way of like just your energy is sort of fun and like cool. I went to high school with him. He had like gauges in his ears, you know what I mean? So it's interesting because they were like, and he also had a very big personality. So I love it.
Yeah. And you really don't meet many Zeke. It's like funny because even at work, like I run into like customers, and if it's somebody I've never met before, like they're like, what's your name? And they're like, Steve, when I say it, and I'm like, and I have to like spell it out so that they understand. And every single time they're always like, oh, is that short for Ezekiel? Or they're like, I had a guy today and he's like, Zeke. He's like, I love that name. And he's like, he yells to his wife. He's like, yo, his name's Zeke. And like, it's like, it just like makes me happy, because it's like, you don't often, so like people for some reason love that name, the nickname Zeke.
Yeah. I've only ever known one other person.
Yeah, you've really, I don't think I've ever met another Ezekiel or Zeke ever.
No. Look, you picked the perfect name.
But that doesn't count.
So. No, that doesn't count. Well, this has been, Zeke, an amazing episode. I'm already like, okay, next season 2, have you in person. It's going to be good. Thank you, everyone. If you would like to reach out to Zeke, please, and you can't remember what the email or whatever, please feel free to reach out to me and I can get you in hold of him. If you have any questions or would like to reach out to the Hair Healer Podcast, email me, thehairhealerpodcast@yahoo.com. Follow me on Instagram at thehairhealer1111. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Zeke, for coming on and having this fabulous episode. You're amazing.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.